Pam Bondi stepped out of the taxi, stretching her stiff arms after a long flight. The sun was just setting behind the ocean, painting the sky in soft gold. She took a deep breath, feeling the salty breeze touch her face. After weeks of travel and endless meetings, she was finally here, a few days to rest before her next conference. She didn't need luxury, just peace and quiet. But she had chosen this hotel because it was said to be one of the best in the city. The photos online showed wide glass windows, a sparkling pool, and a calm view of the sea. Dragging her small suitcase behind her, Pam entered through the glass doors of the hotel lobby. The marble floor gleamed like water, and the air smelled of perfume and expensive coffee. Around her, people were dressed in shiny clothes, loud laughter echoing from the corner where a group of guests sipped cocktails. Pam, dressed in a plain beige shirt and simple pants, looked like she had just come from a long journey, and she had. Her hair was tied neatly, her face without makeup, and her old leather bag hung over her shoulder. She looked ordinary, and in that lobby, ordinary stood out. At the front desk, a young woman with perfect hair smiled at a couple checking in before Pam. The smile was wide and warm, but when her eyes met Pam's, it faded slightly, replaced by that polite look people give when they think they already know your story. Pam waited patiently until it was her turn. "Good evening," she said kindly, placing her ID and reservation papers on the counter. "I have a booking for 3 nights." The receptionist typed on her keyboard, her tone suddenly changing from cheerful to mechanical. "Name?" "Pam Bondi," she replied. The woman's eyes flickered at the screen, then at Pam's simple clothes. She said quietly, clicking her mouse several times. "One moment, please." Pam noticed her whisper something to the man beside her, who glanced at Pam briefly and shrugged. They exchanged a quick smirk before continuing their work. Pam could hear bits of their conversation. "Online booking again?" one muttered. The other laughed softly. Pam said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence sometimes speaks louder than words. After a few more clicks, the receptionist finally said, "Yes, we have your reservation. Standard room, correct?" Pam frowned slightly. "No, I booked the Ocean View suite. It should have been confirmed last week." The woman hesitated, then smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile people use to cover annoyance. "I'm sorry, ma'am, all suites are currently full. You must have read the confirmation incorrectly." Pam took out her phone and showed the email. "It says here, Ocean View suite confirmed." The receptionist looked at it for half a second, then returned to her screen. "I see. Well, there must have been a system error. I can offer you a standard room for now." Pam stayed calm, though her tired eyes showed disappointment. "I traveled all day," she said softly. "Could you please double-check with your manager?" This was a prepaid booking. The woman sighed as if the request was an inconvenience. "Our manager is in a meeting," she said quickly. "You can discuss it tomorrow. For now, please take this key." She placed a key card on the counter, sliding it across without looking up. Pam took it gently. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. But as she turned to leave, she heard the woman whisper again to her coworker. "Some people book cheap rooms and then pretend they got upgrades. Happens all the time." Pam didn't look back. She walked toward the elevator, her suitcase wheels clattering softly behind her. Inside, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall. There was nothing fancy about her, that much was true. But she didn't need to prove her worth with clothes or jewelry. She only wished others didn't judge so quickly. When she reached her room, she opened the door and sighed. It was small, with a single bed pushed against the wall and a window facing the parking lot. The air was stale and the sound of traffic outside was loud. She placed her bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls that looked dull and slightly cracked near the ceiling. This was definitely not what she had paid for. She opened her laptop to send an email to the booking team, but then stopped. She was too tired. Her eyelids felt heavy, and the only thing she wanted was sleep. Maybe tomorrow things would look different. The next morning, Pam woke up early. She decided not to let the bad check-in experience ruin her day. After a quick shower, she dressed in fresh clothes and went down to the dining hall for breakfast. The restaurant was bright and elegant. A large buffet spread out with fresh fruit, pastries, and hot dishes. But as she entered, the hostess at the door gave her a look that made her pause. "Room number?" the hostess asked, glancing at Pam's simple bag. 3, Pam answered. The hostess checked the list and hesitated before nodding. "Table near the wall, please." Pam noticed that most guests were being seated near the windows with a view of the sea. She didn't mind sitting by the wall, but the tone of the hostess told her it wasn't just about seating, it was about assumptions. When the waiter came, he placed a menu quickly and left without asking if she wanted coffee. Pam watched as he smiled and chatted with other guests but avoided eye contact with her. She waited quietly until he passed by again and said, "Excuse me, could I have a cup of coffee, please?" He nodded but didn't return for nearly 10 minutes. When he did, the cup was half full and cold. Pam stirred it slowly, trying not to let frustration show. She had been through worse in her life, but something about this quiet judgment stung. She wasn't looking for special treatment, just respect. After breakfast, she walked outside to the hotel garden. The sun was high and waves rolled gently against the rocks nearby. A few other guests were taking photos by the pool. Pam sat on a bench, letting the breeze calm her mind. As she sat there, a young bellboy passed by and nodded politely. He was the first staff member who looked at her with genuine kindness. "Good morning, ma'am," he said softly. "Good morning," Pam replied with a smile. He hesitated, then said quietly, "If you don't mind, ma'am, you were supposed to be in the Ocean View suite. I remember your name from the list yesterday. I don't know why they gave you that small room." Pam raised her eyebrows. "Really?" He nodded, lowering his voice. "Yes, the suite wasn't booked until tomorrow. Maybe they wanted to save it for a walk-in guest who pays extra." Pam's calm eyes met his. "Thank you for telling me," she said. The boy smiled shyly and walked away. Pam sat in silence, watching the waves, her mind deep in thought. She wasn't angry, not yet, but she was disappointed. That evening, when she came down for dinner, things didn't get better. She walked into the restaurant again, and the same hostess looked surprised to see her. "Dinner reservations?" she asked stiffly. "I'm staying at the hotel," Pam said. "I'd like a table for one." The hostess hesitated, then led her to a corner table near the kitchen door. The noise of clattering dishes and staff shouting orders filled the air. Pam glanced around. There were several empty tables near the windows, but those were being saved for special guests. As she looked at the golden lights dancing on the water outside, she couldn't help but wonder what it would take for people to look beyond appearances. Halfway through dinner, she noticed a man at another table staring at her. He leaned toward his companion and whispered something that made them both laugh. Pam caught only a few words, something about wrong place and cheap stay. Her stomach tightened, but she didn't show it. She calmly finished her meal, paid the bill, and left without a word. Later that night, back in her small room, she opened her laptop and stared at the blank screen. She had planned to write a simple feedback email, maybe complain about the wrong room, but now she wasn't sure if it would even matter. People like that receptionist and those guests wouldn't learn from a complaint. They'd just make excuses. She closed the laptop and stood by the window, looking at the faint reflection of her face against the dark glass. In that moment, she made a quiet decision. She wouldn't argue, she wouldn't shout, and she wouldn't seek revenge. She would observe. She would let them show who they really were. Because what they didn't know, what no one in that hotel lobby had realized, was that Pam Bondi was not just another traveler. She was an investor, a businesswoman known in her field for turning struggling companies into success stories. And this hotel, the one that looked down on her, was part of a chain she had been asked to evaluate before a major partnership decision. They thought she was invisible, but soon they would learn who really had the power to make changes. Pam turned off the lights and lay on the bed, listening to the sound of cars outside. Tomorrow would bring something new. For now, she closed her eyes and smiled faintly. Sometimes, she thought, life has a way of showing people exactly who they are without a single word spoken. The next morning, Pam woke up early. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, cutting lines of gold across the dull walls of her small room. The air conditioner had stopped sometime in the night, and the room felt warm and heavy. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. The events from the day before replayed in her mind. The cold looks, the whispers, the false smiles. She could have checked out and gone somewhere else. She had the money, and there were plenty of other hotels in the city. But something inside her told her to stay. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the quiet strength she had carried all her life. She had learned long ago that people reveal their true nature when they think no one important is watching. Pam got dressed, tying her hair in a neat bun. She wore a simple blue shirt and a clean pair of trousers. Before leaving the room, she looked around again at the cracked ceiling, the old carpet, and the half-broken lamp by the bed. She smiled softly to herself. "Let's see what today brings," she whispered. Down in the lobby, the same receptionist from yesterday was at the front desk. She was talking to another staff member and didn't even glance up when Pam walked by. The sound of her laughter stopped briefly as she saw Pam heading toward the breakfast area, then continued as if nothing happened. Pam walked past her quietly, not expecting warmth, just noticing. She believed in observing rather than reacting. The restaurant was half full. The guests looked happy, chatting over plates of fruit and pastries. A soft piano tune played in the background. Pam found a small table near the corner, away from the crowd. When the waiter came, he didn't greet her properly. "Coffee?" he asked flatly, his eyes looking past her. "Yes, please," Pam replied politely. He nodded and left without writing anything down. A few minutes later, he brought a cup and set it down with a small splash spilling on the saucer. He didn't say a word. Pam cleaned it with a napkin, still calm. She took a sip. The coffee was lukewarm, but she didn't complain. She had no intention of creating a scene. Across the room, she noticed a group of hotel staff whispering near the service door. She couldn't hear the words clearly, but their eyes flicked toward her now and then. She sighed quietly, feeling that same familiar sting of being judged for appearances. When she finished breakfast, she decided to walk to the beach behind the hotel. A narrow path led to a quiet part of the shore, where the sound of waves filled the air. She stood there for a while, letting the wind brush through her hair. For a moment, she forgot the tension of the hotel. She thought about how easily people misjudge others. It wasn't the first time she had been looked down upon because she didn't show off her wealth. She had built her success slowly, with hard work and patience, not with labels and luxury. And maybe that was why she still felt grounded. As she stood by the water, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant back in the city. "Ma'am, confirming your inspection schedule for the Bondi Group hotels. Hope everything's going smoothly." Pam looked at the message for a long moment, then smiled faintly. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she turned the phone face down and looked at the sea again. The irony of it all wasn't lost on her. The people treating her like she didn't belong had no idea she was one of the people responsible for reviewing this very property. She walked back slowly, her sandals brushing against the sand. When she entered the hotel again, she noticed a couple arguing at the front desk. The same receptionist who had mistreated her was now smiling sweetly, trying to calm them. "Of course, sir, we'll upgrade you immediately," she said, her tone dripping with kindness. Pam watched the scene from a distance. It was clear that the couple looked wealthy. Designer clothes, loud voices, and confident posture. The staff's attitude changed completely when they saw money. Pam took out her notebook and quietly wrote a few things down. She wasn't taking revenge. She was collecting truth. Later that afternoon, Pam decided to visit the rooftop terrace where she could work on her laptop. When she arrived, she found the area nearly empty. Only one waiter was there, wiping down tables. "Excuse me," Pam said kindly. "Do you mind if I sit here for a while?" The waiter nodded without much interest. "As long as you order something," he said. Pam smiled gently. "Of course." She ordered a lemonade and opened her laptop. The breeze was pleasant and the sound of waves below was soothing. She began typing notes about her stay, the check-in experience, the staff behavior, the condition of the rooms, and the service quality. Her tone remained objective, but each sentence carried quiet honesty. Half an hour later, the waiter returned with her drink. He placed it down quickly and walked away without saying a word. Pam looked at the condensation dripping from the glass, then took a small sip. The lemonade was bitter and too warm, but again she said nothing. She wasn't here for comfort, she was here for truth. As the day went on, Pam observed more small moments that revealed the hotel's real culture. The doorman smiled widely for rich-looking guests but barely nodded at others. The cleaning staff seemed overworked, moving quickly and nervously whenever a supervisor appeared. The managers passed by with clipboards, avoiding eye contact with anyone who didn't look important. Pam had worked in business long enough to know that these little details spoke louder than numbers. A company's soul was found in how it treated people when no one was watching. That evening, Pam decided to dine in the main restaurant again. She was tired but curious to see if anything would change. When she arrived, the hostess from the night before looked up, clearly remembering her. "Oh, good evening," the hostess said in a hesitant tone. "Table for one again?" Pam nodded with a soft smile. "Yes, please." The hostess led her to the same corner table near the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of cooking oil and the clatter of dishes filled her ears. Pam took her seat calmly and opened the menu. A few minutes later, the same waiter from breakfast appeared. "What will you have?" he asked bluntly. "I'll take the vegetable soup and grilled fish," she said. He scribbled quickly and walked away. As Pam waited, she noticed two women entering the restaurant, both dressed elegantly. The hostess rushed to them with a big smile, leading them to a table by the window. Within minutes, waiters brought them sparkling water and bread without being asked. Pam watched quietly, not in jealousy but with deep thought. When her food arrived, it was barely warm. The soup looked thin and watery. Pam tasted it once and set the spoon down. As she sat there, a manager walked by, greeting guests at random tables but skipping hers entirely. Pam watched him pass, his eyes gliding right over her as if she didn't exist. She smiled to herself, half amused, half saddened. It was almost predictable now. People saw what they wanted to see. When she finished dinner, she paid and stood up to leave. On her way out, the young bellboy from the day before saw her again and gave her a small nod. "I hope your stay is better today, ma'am," he said shyly. Pam smiled warmly. "Thank you. You've been very kind." He looked surprised, maybe because few guests ever noticed him. "Just doing my job, ma'am," he said softly. Pam placed a small tip in his hand. "No," she said. "You're doing it with respect. That's different." As she walked toward the elevator, she could feel the tiredness in her body, but her mind was awake and sharp. She had seen enough for 2 days to understand the real picture. This hotel had everything: location, design, and potential. But it lacked the one thing money couldn't buy: genuine kindness. When she reached her room, she opened her laptop again and began typing her daily report. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys as she described every interaction, every expression, every failure of empathy. It wasn't written in anger. It was written with clarity. After finishing, she sat back and read the words again. Her eyes softened. She knew that when the truth came out, it wouldn't just be about her. It would be about everyone who had ever been judged unfairly. As night settled outside, Pam stood by the window looking at the faint reflection of city lights on the ocean. She thought about how strange it was that people could treat others so differently, just based on appearance. It wasn't about her pride, it was about principle. Tomorrow, she told herself, would be the day she stopped observing quietly. She didn't plan to embarrass anyone, but she believed in facing things directly and kindly. She turned off the lights, leaving the room in soft darkness. The faint hum of cars outside and the steady sound of waves below mixed into a calm rhythm. She smiled faintly, her thoughts quiet but firm. Some lessons in life don't need to be shouted, they just need to be lived. And soon everyone in that hotel would learn a lesson they'd never forget. The next morning began quietly. The sky was clear, and sunlight poured through the glass lobby windows, making the hotel shimmer like something out of a travel brochure. Guests laughed near the front desk, suitcases rolled across the marble floor, and the air buzzed with that busy energy of people coming and going. But for Pam, that morning carried a different kind of stillness, the kind that comes right before something changes. She woke up early again, as always. After making a cup of instant coffee in her small room, she sat at the edge of her bed, looking over the notes she had written during the past 2 days. Every page carried details, names, times, actions, not to expose anyone, but to understand. She had spent her life learning that truth is best discovered quietly. Around 8 a.m., she dressed neatly in a simple white blouse and gray slacks. Her hair, brushed and tied, framed her calm face. She looked composed, like someone who knew exactly where she was going, even if no one else did. When she entered the lobby, the same receptionist from before was at her post. The woman's laughter filled the air as she chatted with another guest, her tone sweet and polite. But when she noticed Pam approaching the counter, her smile thinned slightly. "Good morning," Pam said softly. "I'd like to speak with the manager, please." The receptionist's expression shifted just a little, as if surprised that Pam would ask for something beyond housekeeping. "The manager is very busy right now," she said quickly. "Is there something I can help you with?" Pam gave her a small smile. "Yes, I'll wait for him. Thank you." The receptionist hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She nodded stiffly and made a quick call. Pam stepped aside, watching the people move around the lobby. Business travelers rushing out, a family checking in. The bellboy she had spoken to earlier helping with luggage. She noticed again how his kindness stood out. He spoke to everyone with the same tone, gentle, respectful, unforced. It reminded her that good character doesn't need titles. A few minutes later, the manager appeared. He was a tall man in his 50s, dressed in a dark suit holding a tablet. His eyes scanned the room before landing on Pam. "Good morning," he said with practiced politeness. "I'm the manager. How may I assist you?" Pam nodded calmly. "Good morning. I wanted to discuss my reservation. I booked an ocean view suite, but I was placed in a small room facing the parking lot." The manager glanced at the receptionist, who quickly looked down at her computer. "There must have been a mistake in the system," he said. "I'm sure my team handled it the best they could." Pam's eyes were steady. "I understand mistakes happen, but when I showed the confirmation, I was told it was my fault. I was also treated with, let's say, very little respect." The manager's professional smile wavered. "I'm sure that wasn't the intention. Our staff treat all guests equally." Pam said nothing for a moment. She simply nodded. "I appreciate your time," she said quietly. "That's all I needed to know." The manager frowned slightly. He had expected a complaint, maybe anger, maybe demands for compensation. Instead, her calm tone left him unsettled. "Would you like me to move you to a better room now?" he asked. Pam looked at him, her expression unreadable. "No, thank you. I'll be checking out tomorrow anyway." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with a puzzled look. Later that morning, she sat in the hotel cafe with her laptop open. She wasn't working on company reports this time. She was drafting an internal evaluation document, one that would be sent to the Bondi Group's headquarters later that week. The document wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. While she typed, her phone buzzed again. It was her assistant. "Good morning, ma'am. The board asked if your site visit at the Ocean Resort Hotel went well. They're scheduling your final meeting with the ownership team for tomorrow afternoon." Pam replied with a short message. "It's going exactly as it needs to." She closed her phone and continued typing. Around lunchtime, she went down to the restaurant again. This time, the atmosphere felt lighter, maybe because she knew something they didn't. The same waiter approached her table with the same disinterested tone. "Are you dining alone again?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, with her usual calm. He wrote something on his notepad, muttering, "All right, table for one," and walked off. Pam looked out the window at the sea, her mind half lost in thought. She wasn't angry at these people, not really. She pitied them a little. They didn't know how easily their behavior could change someone's perception of the entire brand. She knew that soon enough they would learn the value of treating every person with dignity. Halfway through her meal, she noticed the same manager walking across the dining area, speaking to another guest, a man wearing a tailored suit and an expensive watch. The manager's posture was straight, his tone filled with admiration. He bent slightly as he spoke, nodding often. But as he passed by Pam's table, his eyes flickered her way and quickly moved on. Pam smiled faintly. "You can always tell who people think matters," she murmured to herself. After lunch, she returned to her room to prepare for a few work calls. She opened her laptop again, this time joining a video meeting with several executives from the Bondi Group. Their faces appeared on the screen, cheerful and curious. "Pam," one of them said, "how's your on-site inspection going? That property's been on our list for months." "The owners are eager to finalize the investment." Pam's calm smile returned. "It's been revealing," she said. "The location is beautiful. The infrastructure is strong, but the staff training and guest handling are deeply lacking. I have detailed notes." Another executive leaned forward. "So it's not ready for the partnership?" "Not yet," Pam said firmly. "But I'll be addressing the management team personally before I leave tomorrow. They need to see what hospitality truly means." The others nodded, trusting her completely. Pam had earned that trust over years of fairness and integrity. When the call ended, she sat quietly for a while, her hands folded in her lap. She thought about all the faces she'd seen since she arrived, the receptionist, the waiter, the hostess. She wondered how they would react when they realized who she was. Would they feel shame, or would they learn something? She hoped it would be the latter. That evening, she went for a walk along the beach. The sun was setting again, the sky glowing orange and pink. Families laughed nearby, children ran across the sand, and waves rolled over their feet. Pam walked slowly, her shoes in her hand, feeling the cool sand between her toes. She thought about her life, how many times people had underestimated her. When she was younger, she'd been treated the same way, ignored in meetings, dismissed in boardrooms. But she never fought for recognition. She let her work speak, and now she was in a position where her voice carried weight, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Back in her room later that night, she packed her suitcase neatly, even though she had one more day left. She liked being prepared. Then she sat by the window, watching the lights from the city shimmer on the water. Her thoughts drifted to the hotel staff again. She wondered if they treated everyone like this or if she had just been unlucky. But deep down she knew the truth. It wasn't about luck. It was about mindset. People see what they want to see. And in their eyes, she hadn't looked like someone worth respecting. She whispered quietly to herself, "Tomorrow, they'll see me for who I am. But not because I tell them. Because they'll realize it on their own." The next morning, her plan began without any announcement. She made one call to the corporate office. Within hours, an official email went out to the hotel's management, informing them that a senior representative from the Bondi Group would be conducting an unscheduled review meeting that afternoon. The staff buzzed with nervous energy. The manager rushed from floor to floor, straightening his tie, checking rooms, barking orders. The receptionist, who had once dismissed Pam, whispered anxiously to a coworker, "Do you know who the representative is?" No one knew, but everyone felt the tension. Pam, meanwhile, went about her morning quietly. She sat in the cafe, sipping coffee, unnoticed by most. She saw the staff running around, their sudden professionalism almost amusing. It was like watching a play where everyone had finally realized they were being watched. At noon, she returned to her room, changed into a simple but elegant navy blue dress, and gathered her documents. She checked her reflection one last time, not to look powerful, but to look herself. When she stepped into the conference room later that day, the manager nearly dropped his tablet. His face drained of color. Behind him stood the same receptionist and a few department heads, all equally confused. Pam greeted them with a calm smile. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm Pam Bondi, regional investor and quality auditor for the Bondi Group. I believe you were informed of a review meeting." The silence that followed was heavy. The manager stuttered something that sounded like, Yes, of course, Ms. Bondi." Pam walked to the head of the table and set down her folder. "Please," she said gently, "have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Every pair of eyes in the room dropped to the floor. No one dared to speak. And for the first time since she had arrived, Pam wasn't the invisible guest anymore. She was the one who ruled the room, quietly, gracefully, and with the kind of power that didn't need to be announced. The next morning came with the sound of waves brushing softly against the shore. The hotel lobby was busy again, guests walking in and out, staff moving fast behind the counters, pretending everything was normal. But deep down, they all felt a strange sense of tension in the air. News had spread quietly through the team. Pam wasn't just another guest. She was someone important, someone who had the power to change everything for them. The manager, who barely slept that night, was pacing near the elevators. He had already called a meeting with his department heads. His shirt wasn't ironed properly, his tie hung loose, and the worry in his eyes was impossible to hide. When he saw Pam walking toward the restaurant, calm as always, his heart nearly stopped. He wanted to say something, to fix things before it was too late, but the words refused to come out. Pam noticed him but didn't stop. She wasn't angry and she wasn't cold. She just carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that made everyone around her straighten up without being told to. She took a seat by the window in the restaurant, ordered her breakfast politely, and started reading something on her tablet. The same waiter who had ignored her the night before now stood awkwardly nearby, waiting for her to look up. He didn't know what to say. Should he apologize? Should he pretend like nothing happened? His hands were shaking slightly as he poured her a glass of water. Pam looked up and gave him a small smile. "Thank you," she said softly. That simple word made him feel worse than any scolding could have. He nodded and quickly walked away. Upstairs, the manager called an emergency staff meeting. Everyone who had dealt with Pam was told to attend. The receptionist, the waiter, the housekeeping supervisor. No one was spared. They gathered in the small conference room, the atmosphere heavy and silent. The manager stood in front of them, holding a printed email from corporate in his hands. "I don't think I need to tell you how serious this is," he began, his voice unsteady. "Ms. Bondi is not just a guest. She's one of the key investors in our hotel group. She's been staying here to evaluate our performance. And if what she experienced reflects our standards—" He paused, looking around the room. "Then we're in trouble. Big trouble." The receptionist's face turned pale. The waiter looked down, embarrassed. Some of the staff whispered quietly, realizing how badly they had treated her. The manager rubbed his forehead. "We all thought she was just some ordinary guest. But that's the problem," he continued. "Even if she was, she deserved respect. Every guest does. We forgot that." He told them that Pam had asked for a meeting later that afternoon. No one knew exactly what it was about, but everyone feared it was going to be their worst day. The receptionist started to cry quietly, whispering, "I didn't mean to be rude. I just thought—" But she couldn't finish. The waiter patted her shoulder, equally ashamed. Hours later, as the clock hit 3, the staff gathered in the same conference room again. This time Pam was standing at the front. She wore a simple white blouse and light gray trousers. Nothing fancy, but her calm confidence filled the room. The manager stood beside her, nervous, while the others sat quietly, their eyes glued to the table. Pam looked around the room before speaking. Her voice was soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you for being here," she began. "I asked for this meeting because I believe in giving people a chance to grow. What happened here wasn't just about me. It's about something much bigger." No one moved. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. "When I checked in 2 days ago," Pam continued, "I came as a guest, not as an investor. I wanted to see how this place feels from the other side. The side of someone who doesn't come with a title or a name that carries weight. What I experienced was disappointing. Not because of a mistake in booking, but because of how I was made to feel." She paused, letting her words sink in. The receptionist looked up for the first time, her eyes red. Pam noticed but didn't single anyone out. "When people walk through those doors," she said gently, "you don't know their stories. Maybe they saved up for months for one night here. Maybe they're running from something painful. Or maybe they just need kindness after a long day. You never know. But what you give them, the way you treat them, can change how they see themselves. That's the power you hold, even if you don't realize it." She walked slowly across the room, looking at each person in turn. Hospitality isn't about fancy furniture or expensive uniforms. It's about people. It's about how you make someone feel welcome, no matter who they are. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Everyone was listening, really listening. Pam stopped and looked at the manager. "I know this hotel has potential," she said. "But potential means nothing without empathy. So here's what I've decided." The manager straightened up, unsure of what was coming next. "I'm not pulling the partnership," Pam said firmly. "But this place needs a change, a real one. Starting tomorrow, my company will sponsor a full hospitality retraining program for your entire team. I'll personally send in a consultant who'll teach not just service skills, but human understanding. It's not about punishment. It's about building something stronger." The staff exchanged surprised glances. They had expected anger, not mercy. Pam turned back to them. "But I need your commitment," she added. "You can't treat this as another company formality. You need to mean it. Because if the heart doesn't change, the rules won't matter." The manager nodded quickly, promising they would all cooperate fully. The receptionist stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Bondi, I'm sorry," she said shakily. "I shouldn't have judged you. It wasn't right." Pam smiled softly and walked over to her. "It takes courage to admit that," she said kindly. "That's how change begins." She didn't scold her or make her feel small. Instead, she offered her hand and the receptionist took it, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Thank you." The waiter followed next. "Ma'am, I treated you unfairly too. I thought you were just, well, not someone important. I see now that everyone deserves the same respect." Pam nodded. "That realization will take you far," she said warmly. "It's not about me. It's about how you'll treat the next person who walks in." By the end of the meeting, the mood in the room had completely changed. The tension was replaced by something different, hope. The staff stayed behind for a long time, talking quietly about what had happened. For the first time in months, they felt like a team again, not just employees doing a job. Later that evening, Pam walked through the hotel lobby once more. She noticed how the receptionist greeted a new guest with a smile that was genuine, not forced. The bellboy rushed to help an elderly couple with their luggage, speaking to them kindly. The restaurant staff looked more attentive. It was small, but it was a start. Pam stopped by the front desk before heading to her room. The manager stood there looking exhausted but relieved. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he said. "We don't deserve your patience, but I promise we'll earn it." Pam nodded. "I believe you will," she replied. "This hotel could be something special. You just needed to remember what makes people come back. It's not the rooms or the view. It's the feeling they get when they're here." That night, as she packed her suitcase, Pam looked out the window at the sea. The waves shimmered under the moonlight, peaceful and endless. She thought about how easily people forget what really matters in a world obsessed with appearances. But she also knew that one act of understanding could ripple through countless others, changing things quietly, deeply, and for the better. The next morning, she checked out early, leaving a handwritten note at the front desk. It said simply, "Thank you for listening. Keep doing better, not for me, but for every guest who will walk through your doors." The receptionist read it later and smiled, holding back tears. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her drawer, promising herself she'd never forget that lesson. Pam's car drove away from the hotel, the sun rising in the distance. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew she had left something far more valuable behind than money or status. She had left a reminder, a spark, that would change that place forever. Would you like me to write part 5 next? The final part where Pam returns to see how much